All right, two things as we get started. First, I sent you an email yesterday around noon that's got the blank version, the same one you got for your test. So if you want to start fresh, you can. You don't want to do that, you want to start and just work with it, your copy, then do that too. All right? My first question to you, and I'm asking because I don't know this. When I run this, and it looks like this, okay, make this a little smaller, okay, when it looks like this, all right, am I right, this is my question for you, is am I right in assuming, looking at the screen right now, and looking at this, that you understand all of the HTML that's in there? Is that a fair assumption to make? Is there anything that's in there that people don't understand? What kind of confuses people at times is this. That's literally just putting in the asterisk. And notice it says span there. We've used divs. We want that to be on the same line as the text boxes, correct? If we made those divs, they'd be on the next line down. We don't want that. So span says keep it on the line you're on. Div would say move it on to a new line. All right, we're using the class of error because that's making it red. I mean, if I go in here and I do a file, open, and I look at the CSS and the style, I see that I've got an error class that's got a color red. If I wanted to, I could really make it stand out by saying font weight bold. You don't have to do that, but that might make it a little easier to really have it stand out. That'll mean that the error messages that come out will be bolded. You didn't have to do that, but it's something that could have been done. All right. I think other than that, I mean, hopefully at least everything that's in there is stuff that makes sense to you. The other thing, this, again, I'm asking. I don't know, so I'm asking. Does everybody understand right now there's nothing in that paragraph? That's where we're going to add the final totals when we do the display all or whatever you called it. It's going to go in there. We're going to use a DOM method to write that. Does that make sense? All right. So no questions then. So then I'm just going to jump right into the file here. So I'm jumping right into the JavaScript file. All right. Again, I'm asking, anything in there, I think we said we didn't have to use the total underweight, the total. I don't think we did totals, but I'll leave it. It's fine. All right. Anything in the constants that anybody has any questions on? Anything in the global variables that anybody has any questions on? The newest were these. All right. Now, I don't care if I have one person or if I have a million persons or people. How many smallest BMIs do I have? One. Does that make sense? I could have a lot of people with the same smallest BMI, but there's only one. Same thing with biggest. Does that make sense? There should only be one of each. That's the first thing to realize. All right? Okay. Second, the next thing we were supposed to do is, and you got this from a previous program, but we were supposed to come in here and we were supposed to use or set this thing up, however you want to call it, okay? That we would use our alias. So that was this, var $ equal function ID, oh, that's spelled function, right? Return document dot get element by ID. Now, a couple things about this. If you look up on the screen here, first of all, this didn't have to be called ID, but it makes sense because it's an ID. So that right there doesn't have to be called ID, neither does this. This has to be typed in exactly like that. All right? So what this particular function says is rather than us having to type in something like this, I'm just making this up. Rather than saying like height equals So if we were setting a variable var height, rather than saying that, which is okay to do, but this would be height, probably with a little h, all right? So rather than saying that, we can now come in and say var height equals $height. And I just put that there to show you we're saving some keystrokes, which is the reason for doing that. You don't have to do that, but you almost always see that in JavaScript programs that work with forms. Okay? All that makes sense. All right. So, that was the first thing. Then next, we were supposed to, this is a function that will be called when the reset button is clicked on the form. All right? So, what did we want to do for that? All right? Well, I called mine reset form. All right? So this is what we're going to do. Now, one thing to realize, please look again on the screen. I made a mistake here. Nobody caught it. I need a semicolon there. Anytime you make a function that does not have a name, anytime you create a function that does not have a name like this, it's called an anonymous function. Anonymous functions, since they're anonymous, you go and you set them equal to the value of a variable. So you're using a function like it's a variable. Since you're using the function like it's a variable, you need a semicolon on the end. Everybody hear that? Later on, we'll write some of our own functions where we won't need a semicolon on the end because they're named functions. All right. So let's jump right into this. So what are we supposed to do? Well, you were told. When the reset button is clicked, it should reset all text fields. Well, and what text fields do we have? I can go back to this and look. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 text fields. Does that make sense to everyone? We want to set everything, not just the stuff we're inputting, but we want to set our body mass index and our BMI status. So that's 6 lines of code right there. Then we want to add, we also next, we want to come in and we want to add 1, 2, 3, 4 asterisks back. So again, if you look on here, if I run this, oh, that's not, I'm not that tall. And I put calculate. I click calculate. There's nothing in there right now because we haven't written it yet. But let's suppose there that right there, there was, I don't know, 35. And this said obese. Then when I click this, I want that to go away. I want that to go away, that to go away, that to go away, and these 4 things to be here and those to be gone. Does all that make sense? I'm just trying to show you this graphically as far as what needs to be done. All right? All right, so under this reset thing, first thing I want to do is I want to take those 6 lines, and I call these fname was the first one, and it's got to be in double quotes or single quotes, it doesn't matter. That'll clean that one out. I'm going to just copy this 6 times. All right, so I want to do my first name, I want to do my last name, I want to do my height, I want to do my weight, I want to do my BMI, and I want to do my status. All right? That's first thing. Again, I'm asking, any questions on that? This? Because that ID is what we're putting in here. All right? This $ is saying, instead of saying this right here, I just want to make sure you get this because it's a good question. This is the same thing as saying so this line right here is the same as the line above it. Hopefully that makes some sense then as to why we're doing it that way. All right? So that cleared out those four things. Did it work? I don't know. So I'm going to go back to my index here, and I'm going to put in this and just run it and just throw some garbage values in there because we're not doing anything yet. All right? And I'm going to click reset. Well, that says I'm not calling it yet. That's okay. I'm not going to call that till the end. But ideally, at least, that'll go away, that'll go away, that'll go away, that'll go away, etc. All right. The other thing is we want to add these back again. These 4 asterisks. All right. You don't have to, but I'm just going to put a blank line there. So it's going to be, again, $fname, dot next element sibling dot first child dot node value equals asterisk. I didn't make up, the only thing I made up in this whole thing was fname and asterisk. And I'm telling it to rewrite the asterisk back. That's what I'm telling it to do right there. So I'm going to steal this. Lname, height, weight, and the last thing I want to do in here is I want to set the focus. That's the whole routine. So look at it, key it in, but what I want to know, is there anything that's in that routine that doesn't make sense to you? Because we're going to be doing similar things when we convert this over to a jQuery form, all right, or to a form and use jQuery to validate it. Some of it will be different, but much of it will be the same. So again, look up on the screen here. What are we saying? It'll reset all, I can even put that in there, you don't have to, but all 6 text fields and the 4 span fields. So there should be 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and position the cursor in the miles, not miles, I guess I didn't fix that. That should have been in the first name text box. So that's it. There's 11 lines of actual code in there. All right, so what we've done so far is this, all right, where we used our alias, and everyone said they didn't have any questions on that. All right, again, very small, but again, that is a what? It is an anonymous function. All right, why is it an anonymous function? Doesn't have a name. Since it doesn't have a name, we must assign it to a variable. That's the way it works with anonymous functions. They're good for lack of better words, a one-time shot. So if you're doing something and you got to do it once, all right, and that's all we're doing here. Then we came down and we did this. This is your last chance to ask. Any questions on the first one or the second one? Anything. Again, if you get this to work and you turn it in by the end of the period today, and if you didn't get at least a 70, you will get a 70 now. As I said, to me, if you got a 10 and no one did, but 70 is better than 10. I don't want anyone to fail this class. Failure means that you get under 75%. Remember, Rankin doesn't believe in D's. You might have a D on your record, but if you don't get at least a 75, you fail. All right, everybody has that? Let's go on. Next, this is the function that will be called when the calculate button is clicked. So this is going to be our, what I call process entries, all right? It will call separate functions. So that it will call one function to validate the height, validate the first name, validate the last name, validate the height, validate the weight. Does that make sense? The first thing it's going to do in there is call for functions. I'm asking you this question. You don't have to look on the screen or anything else. First name, last name. What kind of values are those? What are those? They're strings. Height and weight. Those are either ints or floats, correct? Now, the reason I'm telling you that is some of you used parse float or parse int on the first name or the last name. I took off if you did. It makes no sense to try to take a string field and parse it in, when it's a string. You should only use parse int or parse float when you're actually grabbing something that the user put in and trying to convert it into a number. Does that make sense? All right. So this is another anonymous function. And again, I called mine process entries. Again, I want to make sure I've got the semicolon. I've got the semicolon at the end of this one. I've got the semicolon at the end of this one. And now I'm doing this. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab the values. All right. I want to grab the values for what? I want to grab the value for my first name. I want to grab the value for my last name. I want to grab the value for my height. And I want to grab the value for my width. Does all that make sense? In other words, if you look on the screen here, I want this value, this value, this value, and this value. Everything that's in white there, those are my inputs. Everything that's there in gray, those are my outputs, the things I'm calculating. All right, hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say var. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm calling it the same name as what we had previously. So fname equals $. So the first name and the last name, I don't have to do any manipulation of either one of those. All right? The next one, I do. This is going to be height. All right? And I don't want to just do this. This would have been wrong also. I want to do a parse float on that. You could have said parse int. It really doesn't matter if you said parse int or you said parse float. But after you type those in, take a look up on the screen. Again, this is your chance to ask. If there's anything in there that doesn't make sense, ask. All right, so this will say right here, get values from input form. I'm just trying to put a couple comments in there, so hopefully you understand what's going on in here. All right? Again, please look on the screen. I'm asking you this question. Here's a hint. It's the same. The question I'm going to ask you, the answer is the same thing as the number of asterisks there are. All right? So how many fields can we screw up on? 4. You can have something wrong with your first name. In other words, it's blank. Something wrong with your last name, in other words, it's blank. Something wrong with your height, it's either non-numeric or it's out of range. Something wrong with your weight, it's either non-numeric or it's out of range. Does that make sense? All right. Why am I telling you that? Because most of you, when you did this, you had one flag that was called is valid. You can do it like that, but I have 4 flags. I had one flag that I called valid F name, one flag I called valid L name, one flag I called valid height, and one flag I called valid weight. Again, you don't have to do it like that, but each flag is only validating one thing, rather than having one flag validating 4 things, which can be a recipe for disaster. So, I came in here and the next thing I have is var valid F name equal true. All right, so in other words, what I'm assuming here is that whatever you entered for the first name was valid. All right, so those are my flags. And again, it's not that you couldn't have done that. It's not that you couldn't have done it as just having one flag, but it would have been more work. All right. The other thing, and again, if everybody just stop and look on the screen, there's 2 ways that you can validate. I can assume that everything is good, and once it goes bad, I can set it to false. Does that make sense? Or I can assume everything is bad, and only if everything goes through, I can set it to good. So there's 2 ways that you can do this, is what I'm telling you. All right, does everybody have these? All right, then I want to move that up a little bit. So the next thing I want to do, I shouldn't say declare and set. I guess it actually is what I'm doing, so I'll leave it at set. Here I'm going to declare and initialize local variables. And I've got 2 of them. And what are they? They're BMI and their BMI status. Again, I'm asking you this question. Does everybody realize this is the calculated BMI, and that's going to be either underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese? Does all that make sense? All right. Next, I have to call 4 functions. I have to validate this, and this, and this, and this. So I don't try to do anything tricky. I called it validate first name, validate last name, validate height, and validate weight. Just call it what it is, right? All right. To me, that just made the most sense to do that. So my flag validate F or valid F name is going to be equal to a call to validate first name, and I'm going to pass in the first name. Then I want to do the last name. Then I want to do the height. And the weight. So does everybody realize, if you look up on the screen here, if everybody just stop for a second, these variables here, 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 and here, they're all Boolean variables, correct? So these functions here, 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 and here better return either true or false. Does all that make sense? Right. Now, what some of you did was you came in then and you called the function to do the BMI and then do the status. You should only do the BMI and you should only do the status if all four of those fields are valid. Did you hear what I said? You should only call your functions to calculate the BMI and to calculate the BMI status. You should only do those if indeed they were all valid. All right? Well, how do we do that? So you come down here, bless you, and you say, if all validation succeeded, bless you, call calculate BMI and calculate BMI status. Again, I only want to do that. I only want to do that if all four of these return true. If any of those return false, I don't want to call this. That's stuff that just has to make sense to you. All right? So again, if I put a bad value in any one of those input boxes, I don't want to calculate these two. I want to fix it first. If all of these were valid, meaning that all of the functions return true, then I wanted to calculate the BMI and the status. All right? Again, does that all make sense? Sometimes people go, oh yeah, when you explain it like that, it does. Well, I don't know any other way to explain it. All right? So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say this. Now, don't type. I want to show you something first. I could say this. If so don't type this because we're going to make it simpler. In fact, let's change it to So we could do it like this, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it like this. All right? But remember, for each one of these, there's shortcuts. So this is what I put. And we need another paren there. That's a shortcut. But that's a much cleaner read than what we had previously. That's saying if all four flags are equal to true. So it will only do this, what's inside of these curlies, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code. It'll only do these 5 lines of code if indeed everything returned true. All right? I'm asking again. Does that make sense? All right. So what are the 5 things? Well, first, whoops, I don't know how I got that. But Okay, and now that I look at it, there's one thing I forgot to do. I've got the BMI here, right? But it's going to give me something like 26.83571. And I don't want that. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say BMI equals BMI dot to fixed, and I'm going to make it 2 decimal places. You didn't have to do that, but it sure reads a hell of a lot better when you do. And sorry, I've got all that spaces. I just wanted stuff to line up so you could hopefully read it and it made sense to you. That's it for the process entries function. So again, I'll come right back to this. But what did we do? We got our 4 values, our 4 input values, right? Then we declared a flag for each one of those input values so we can validate them. Then we declared the 2 values we're calculating. Then we call the 4 validation functions. And if all of those validation functions succeeded, we figured out, we calculated the BMI and the BMI status. Any questions on any of that stuff? Again, this is your time to ask. So right now, nothing's going to happen if we run this because nothing happens until the bottom of this function when we go and we set up so that all the buttons are linked basically to the associated functions. All right. So declare, validate. If valid, do what you want to do. If they're not valid, you've got to fix them, correct? We don't want to figure out the height, we don't want to figure out the BMI or the BMI status unless we've got something in there for first name. We've got something in there for last name. We've got a number between 12 and 96 for the height. We've got a number between 1 and 777 for the weight. All right, so that's what we've done so far. Does everybody have this? What? Oh, I was told yesterday, I'll come right back to this, but I was told yesterday, for those of you who are typing deficient, you know who you are. There's a thing called typeracer.com. One word, typeracer.com. You enter a typing race. This is you. You're told to type all this stuff in right there. The faster you type, the faster you move. So notice there's actually a race. So I start typing in here, unbeknownst to, and it says, oh, you made a mistake. Okay? So when you make a mistake, your car stops, and all the other cars keep moving. See that? Now, if you don't like that, go out online. There are free. There's Mavis Beacon free. I think that's Mavis Beacon's granddaughter, but I'm not sure because Mavis Beacon's been around forever. I don't think she looks that good. All right, she might. All right, but it's a free typing tutor. So if you say, hell, it's my break, I don't want to work, you're not working, you're learning to type. All right? It's going to be the difference next semester between us doing a lot of work as a class or not doing as much work as a class. Because those of you who type slowly, you hold everybody else back. All right? I'm not aiming that towards any one person. You know who you are if you don't type quickly. All right. So this was the last thing we did. So what's next? Now we want to validate the first name text box contents by checking for blank input. Let me ask you this. Do you realize that this one right here that we're about to create, that one, and the one we'll put under it are exactly the same, except here it's F name and here it's L name. So test the hell out of it for the first name, then copy it in, change the F to an L, and test it again. Does that make sense? Don't do a lot of rework here. Don't go in and especially, don't go and sit there and say, oh, I got to type in those 30 lines again. They're exactly the same 30 lines. It's not 30, it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 lines. But you shouldn't be making more work for yourself than you have to. All right? This function has a name. See that? It's called validate first name. It has a name. So does validate last name. So does validate height. So does validate width. So none of these four are anonymous functions. They're named functions. They do not have a semicolon at the end. Does that make sense? Again, these aren't my rules. These are JavaScript rules. Yeah, Jeff, I hate your rules. Well, sorry, they ain't mine. So, function, validate first name. And I can call this whatever I want. I can call it FN, but I'm just going to call it FName because that's what I'm validating. All right? Ling. I'm going to put this on 2 lines. Did you hear me? Just because I want you to be able to see all of it. Here's my question for you. What just happened? If that's the case, what happened? That's the first thing. But even more basic, and you're right, you're 100% correct. But even more basic than that, what does it mean? What didn't I do? I didn't put in anything in. So I know that I'm, for lack of better words, I'm screwed. Would you agree with that? All right. Please don't type this because I want to show you 2 ways of doing it. And I want you, they're both correct. So I want you to figure out which one you think is better. All right? So I'm going to type in this. Return false. All right? If I get down to here, I don't need to put it in else. But Evan, you just answered the question correctly. So if I get down to here, what does it mean? Here it means I didn't enter a first name, so here it means I did enter a first name. All right? So what do I want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to take and I want to set what goes in there to nothing, correct? I don't want there to be an asterisk. I don't want there to be an error message. I don't want there to be anything. All right? Then I type in return true. All right? Now that's it. Now just stop for a second. I don't care what the hell you're doing. Stop. Because I want to show you the way that many programmers do it instead of this. Many programmers tell you you should only have one return statement when possible in a function. You can do that here. How do you do that? You come in here and at the beginning you create a local variable. We'll call it retval. Local return variable. Why retval? Retval for return value? Retval. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say this. I'm going to assume retval is true. All right? So if there's nothing in the name, all I do here is I say retval equal false, and now here I say return retval. You see the difference? I've only got one return statement in here now. Most programmers would tell you that's a cleaner way of programming. It doesn't matter which way you use. I use this way because it's a cleaner way to program. A lot of times when I'm teaching this stuff to people, I'll put return false down here and return true here so I don't have to have that variable. You ever hear the saying, 6 of one, half dozen of the other? That's what this is. So you figure out if you'd rather do it like this or not have that variable and here say return false and here have it say return true. Either one works. I will tell you, once you start coding, if you get a job where you're a professional, they'll tell you to always do it like this. There's only one point of return then. That's considered much cleaner. Wait a minute, Jeff. But I'm creating another variable here. Isn't that sort of a waste? Yeah, but since it's a local variable, as soon as you get done with that, as soon as it hits the return, as soon as it hits this, it automatically frees up the space that ret val was taking. It tells the system, we don't need it anymore. All right, so I'm going to keep it like that. Does everybody have this? And if you say no, well, the good news is I'm going to grab the whole thing. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to go down to the next function here, and I'm going to paste it in. All right, in fact, I needed everything, so I needed that line too. But now it's validate last name. Don't put larst. So last name, and that'll be an L name, and that'll be L, and that'll be last. And I think that's the only thing I have to change. Validate last name, L name, ret val, L name. Oh, there, L name. Last name is a required field. And L there. And I guess I didn't do the return ret val. And my ending brace. It's exactly the same as the previous one. So I think you're being foolish if you don't test the first one, then copy it over. It's so easy to make typing mistakes. I think you know that already. And I'll tell you what, it's a little early, but let's come back at 10 after 9, all right? And we'll continue on. What do we have to do next? Well, if you look on the up on your code, we have to validate the height, and we have to validate the weight. Remember, those each have 2 validations. 2, all right? They can be either non-numeric or they can be out of range. We wanted different messages, whether they were out of range or whether they were non-numeric. So we'll do that next. All right, please come back at 10 after.